Throughout the history of college basketball, many teams stake claim to greatest team ever. The 76 undefeated Indiana Hoosiers, the 92 Duke team with Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, and Bobby Hurley. Or maybe you want to bring it into the modern era and say the 2012 Kentucky Wildcats. But one team stands above all of them when it comes to statistical dominance and historical importance: the 1971-72 UCLA Bruins. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to High Fiving Strangers. My name is Clint, and today we are talking about the 1971-1972 UCLA Bruins men's basketball team. And man, that is a mouthful. This season was at the end of one of the craziest runs you'll ever see in any sport that probably will never be repeated. Under head coach John Wooden, the UCLA men's basketball team won 10 titles in 12 seasons starting in 1964. So what made this team in that run so special? Well, for starters, it was a perfect 30-0 season complete with utter dominance. Their average margin of victory was over 30 points. Yeah, that's right. Their average margin of victory was 30.3 points that season. They combined elite talent, exceptional coaching, and a revolutionary style of play to produce a level of dominance rarely seen in any sport. But before we dive into this team specifically, let's take a look at the dynasty as a whole and the man that brought it together, John Wooden. Often regarded as the greatest basketball coach in history, Wooden built a program that would redefine excellence across all sports. From 1964 to 1975, UCLA achieved an unprecedented level of dominance. 10 national championships in 12 seasons, including 7 consecutive titles from 1967 to 1973. And in college basketball history, there are only 7 undefeated teams. 4 of them come from this era. During this period, the UCLA Bruins became synonymous with success. Wooden's teams were not only disciplined and fundamentally sound, they were also innovative. Rather than focusing on talent alone, Wooden emphasized preparation through teamwork and mental focus through his pyramid of success. A philosophy that wasn't even really about basketball. It emphasized character, effort, and self-improvement. When the Bruins took the floor to start the season in the fall of '71, they were the 5-time defending national champions, which is insane to think about. Like, that current streak of titles started before everyone on the team had even enrolled in college. So when you start to think about that streak and how this video is about the greatest basketball team of all time, and back then people would stay for all 4 years, you would assume this team was super stacked with seniors. Nope. Of the starting 5 from the previous title, only 1 returning starter, Henry Bibby, was coming back to the team. And 3 of those starters were sophomore, led by the one and only, the greatest character in all of basketball, Bill Walton. Now, before we get into all the individual players and Coach John Wooden, let's actually take a look at the stats right up front so we can talk about how awesome this team was. They dominated in every aspect of the game: efficient shooting, elite rebounding, and lockdown defense. Now, like I said earlier, there have only been 7 total teams in all of college basketball history to have a perfect season. This team being one of them, ending the year 30-0. Now, like every other undefeated team, they won their conference and they won the national title. The difference here, they kicked the shit out of everyone they played. Of the 30 games they played this year, only 2 games were settled by less than double digits: Oregon State in the regular season and Florida State in the national title game. I don't know what it was about state teams, but they were the only ones that kept it close. They scored over 100 points in 12 different games that year, giving them a season average of 94.6 points per game, when the average around that time is somewhere between 70 and 75. And on the flip side, they held their opponents to under 60 points 11 times and under 50 points 3 times, including a game against Notre Dame where they only scored 32 points. Can you imagine that? Holding a team to 32 points? That's crazy. And it's Notre Dame. It's not like it's some Division II team that just is like on the schedule as a cupcake. No, this is a real team, and they held them to 32 points. Allow me to squirrel here just a little bit. Notre Dame eventually does get their revenge for this 32-point ass kicking by stopping this team's 88-game win streak. That's right. If we fast forward past this 30-0 team eventually went on to win 88 straight games. But back to this season, how this team defensively dominated. That year, they held their opponents to an average of 64.3 points per game. And if you're doing the math, that's an average margin of victory of 30.3 points. That stat is crazy and almost unimaginable, especially when you compare them to those other great teams. The 75-76 Indiana Hoosiers that went undefeated had a margin of victory of 17 points. The 91-92 Duke team had an average margin of victory of 15.4 points. And the 2011-2012 Kentucky Wildcats had an average margin of victory of 17.9. Almost doubling the average margin of victory from all those teams is crazy. But Clint, it was a different era, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. An ass kicking is an ass kicking, whatever generation you want to kick that ass in. Now, before we get into the players of this team, you can't tell the story of UCLA basketball without talking about the man who started it all, John Wooden. A man whose history is so crazy that it deserves its entire episode, so I'm not going to get too in the nitty-gritty of like his life and his whole story, but we're going to talk about a few little things here just to get context on this team. Though a fun little tidbit of trivia about him that doesn't have anything to do with this team or him coaching at all. Back when he was a player over a 46-game stretch, he made 134 consecutive free throws, which is still a record today. Though if you look it up, it's going to tell you it's Michael Williams with 97, but that's because that's the NBA record. But he didn't play in the NBA because the NBA didn't exist. He played in the National Basketball League, not the National Basketball Association. The NBA was started in 1946 and he was a pro way before that. But technically it was a professional league, so the record for professional consecutive free throws made is John Wooden. The more you know. But as a coach, his philosophy for success was simple. He didn't talk about winning. He didn't post motivational quotes all over the gym. He taught what he called the pyramid of success, a framework built on personal excellence, character, and teamwork. And you know what the first lesson he taught every single one of his players? How to tie their shoes properly.
Swoop it, you swoop it, you poke.
Because if your feet hurt, you can't play your best. Now allow me to be that guy for a moment when we're talking about something as simple as like making sure you have the right socks on and making sure your shoes are tight. I have run a marathon. It may shock you, but big boy can run. And it may shock you even more that it took 12 episodes for me to mention it, because apparently the stereotype is if you run a marathon, you tell everybody. Well, I ran the New York City Marathon and I did it in 4 hours and 16 minutes. That's right, your boy can run. But as simple as it sounds, socks and shoes are so important. You have to get these tiny details right to be able to perform at your best. And I remember the first time I actually put on a pair of really expensive socks and ran in my really nice shoes. I was like, holy shit, my feet don't hurt. Imagine that. Anyway, back to the Bruins. Wooden's practices were legendary for their precision and organization. Every practice lasted exactly 2 hours, and Wooden planned every detail down to the minute, leaving no wasted time. On the court, Wooden was innovative and was given the nickname the Wizard of Westwood. And it took every ounce of strength I had to not grab a photo of him, throw it into AI, and actually turn him into a real wizard. All right, fuck it, here it is.
You're a wizard, Harry.
His high post offense exploited matchups with surgical precision, but was flexible enough to use the strength of each individual player. On defense, he ran a high-pressure, relentless man-to-man that was frequently matched with a full-court 2-2-1 press. This led to a high number of turnovers, which led to another staple of Wooden's offense, the fast break. He focused heavily on perfecting his own system instead of focusing on what the other team's game plan is, because he said, if we play our game correctly, it doesn't matter what they do. But these tactics alone don't make a team great. You need great players to execute it. And what made his performance unique with this year's team was his adaptability. He lost all but one starter from his previous year's championship team. Lesser coaches might have taken a step back and realized I got to develop these young guys, but what did Wooden do? He handed the keys to 3 sophomores and went 30-0. Now, let's get to know him. Now we have to start with the centerpiece of this team, center sophomore William Theodore Walton III, or as you may know him, Bill Walton. Standing at 6'11", this tall, lanky redhead combined his elite size with remarkable skill and incredible basketball intelligence. That season, he averaged 21.1 points and 15.5 rebounds a game. Walton dominated both offensively and defensively, and one of his best and probably most underrated skills was his passing ability. He was the engine of UCLA's fast break. John Wooden said Bill Walton was the best center he had ever seen throw an outlet pass. He would secure the defensive rebound and then fire the ball down the court with precision and ease. He was also insanely efficient on the offensive end, and that year he averaged a field goal percentage of 63.9, and that efficiency was on full display in a Final Four game against Louisville. Walton scored 33 points on 11 of 15 shooting and pulled down 21 boards. Walton would go on to win 3 consecutive National Player of the Year awards, was a 3-time first-team All-American, the first overall pick in the 1974 NBA draft, a 2-time NBA champion, and after his playing career was done, he would go on to become one of the most unique voices in the entire basketball world. Another future Hall of Famer on that roster was sophomore Jamal "Silk" Wilkes. I bet you'll never guess why they call him Silk. Yeah, that's right. It's because he was smooth.
Wow.
He had an incredible scoring ability with a super unique shooting style where he would put the ball way behind his head and shoot it way up high. That year he averaged 13.5 points per game and an impressive 8.2 rebounds. And I say impressive because he was a 6'6" forward and brought down 8 rebounds a game. His best game that year came at the perfect time in the national championship game against Florida State. There he had a season-high 23 points on an 11 for 16 shooting and 10 rebounds. Some people will argue that he was the Bruins' most complete player. He could score, defend, and rebound against anyone at any time. He was selected first-team All-American twice and was the 11th pick in the 1974 NBA draft, where he would go on to have an incredible pro career and win 4 NBA titles. Up next is the only returning starter for this team and the backbone of UCLA's backcourt, Henry Bibby. As a senior, Bibby averaged 15.7 points per game, second best on the team, and provided a much-needed veteran leadership to a starting lineup that had 3 sophomores. In the championship game against Florida State, he had 18 points, which were crucial as Florida State made their second half run. He was the glue guy for this team, the guy who kept them on the tracks when the pressure was in. Bibby would go on to play 9 seasons in the NBA and won a title in 1974 with the New York Knicks, and is the father of Mike Bibby, who played 14 seasons in the NBA. Larry Farmer was a junior and averaged 10.7 points and 5.5 rebounds per game. He was the kind of versatile forward that really made John Wooden's system work. He was drafted in both the NBA and the ABA, but opted not to play neither and came back to UCLA to be an assistant coach. He was an assistant for his alma mater from 1973 to 1971, where he was then promoted to head coach. Rounding out the starting 5 is the third of 3 sophomores, Greg Lee. Though he only averaged 8.7 points per game, he was a pivotal part of their transition and fast break offense. Another contributor to this team is Swin Nader, who came off the bench as Bill Walton's backup and scored an average of 6.7 points a game. And what's crazy, even though he never started a single game in college, he was able to showcase his skill set as a backup and was drafted in the ABA in 1972 and the NBA in 1973. And he actually went on to have a pretty good professional career. Another little tidbit of trivia, he's the only person to ever lead the league in rebounds for a season in both the NBA and ABA. All right, now let's take a look at the season as a whole and point out some games and key moments that'll make you go, oh damn, that's pretty crazy. They started that season hot as hell and scored over 100 points for the first 7 consecutive games. Let that sink in for a moment. 7 straight games, over 100 points in 1971 where there was no shot clock. And they didn't just score a million points in a track meet and just outlast their opponents in like a 101-98 game. They dominated on the defensive side too, and in that 7-game stretch had an average margin of victory of 47. Their largest ass kicking of the season came during this stretch too, where they more than doubled up Texas A&M 117-53. That's a 64-point beatdown. They cruised through the rest of the regular season, beating everyone except Oregon State by double digits, collecting their 6th straight conference title and headed to the NCAA tournament as the #1 seed and heavy favorites to win it all. They cruised past Weber State in the first round, winning 90-58, and in the second round took down Long Beach State, even though they had their second worst offensive output of the entire year, winning that game 73-59. They bounced back in the third round though and beat Louisville 96-77. They are now 1 game away from an undefeated season and the university's 6th straight national title.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's second and featured game for the National Collegiate Athletic Association Basketball Championship between the Florida State University Seminoles and the UCLA Bruins.
In that title game, they were matched up against Florida State, who came out swinging and jumped out to an early 21-14 lead, stunning everyone in the crowd in what was essentially just a UCLA home game. But thanks to Bill Walton's rebound and UCLA's dominating fast break, they were able to flip the switch and go on a 36-18 run, giving them a halftime score of 50-39. Florida State was not going to give up and roll over and put up a pretty good fight in the second half too, but unfortunately for them, it wasn't quite good enough. The Bruins would win the game 81-76. But if you're willing to take a moral victory, that was actually the closest margin of victory that UCLA had had all year long. Walton finished that game with an impressive 24 points and 20 rebounds. Jamal Wilkes put up 23 points and pulled down 10 rebounds, and Henry Bibby rounded it out with 18 points. The perfect season is complete, and the UCLA Bruins are national champions once again. The legacy of this 71-72 Bruins team, though, goes way beyond the success of just this season. They helped shape the modern basketball strategy, particularly in the areas of like transition offense, high-pressure defense, and just overall team play. So where do you think they land on the list of best basketball teams ever? Because let's be honest, one of the most fun things about sports is creating a list and then arguing about it. There's always going to be people that are going to try to talk about the difference in era and how the tournament was way smaller. There was only 25 teams in 4 rounds. But when you take a step back and look at everything as a whole, I don't really think there's that much of an argument. But I'm willing to have it in the comments. So what do you think? 30 wins, 0 losses, Hall of Fame players, a Hall of Fame coach, and an average margin of victory of 30 that will never be matched again. Thanks for watching this episode of High Fiving Strangers. Like, subscribe, and comment down below what player, team, or event you want to see me cover next. The best way to support the channel is picking up some merch. And as always, get out there and high five some strangers. He had an incredible scoring ability and a super unique shooting style where you put the ball like hit the mic.